Hello, this is FM Valeri Lilov, and now I'd like to talk about the attack against a castled king of the opponent. Now, if the king of the opponent has uncastled, it means it stays in the middle of the board. Only the thought about such a position gives us the idea that we can immediately attack on that with sacrifices, ideas to break his position, or, in fact, lead the initiative. That's why all the chess books and manuals, all the great masters, have always advised the chess player to develop his pieces quickly and castle as soon as possible. However, even when the king is castled, we can very easily notice that there are games in which a certain player creates a very significant and, of course, successful attack in the end against the castled king. Why is that happening? Isn't the king quite safe once he has castled and he's safe behind his pawns? Well, obviously it is, but in the process of play, in fact, the game turns some changes. For example, let's say that the pawns are drawn away from the king. There are some weak squares that arise in process of that. Of course, the pieces that are defending around the king should also move at some point. And all of that means that the king, at a certain point, might become pretty weak out of defense. So that's why we have to remember that most of all, in any case when the opponent's king castles, we can consider putting our pieces close to that area, maybe not exactly out there, but close to this area, so that we can get the chance when there are particular circumstances which will favor us, like for instance the opponent makes some weaknesses, or some of his pieces are drawn away, we can have the actual possibility and the resource to exploit these weakenings in the most effective way possible. Nevertheless, you have to remember that we have to use this temporary advantage in the faster way possible, because if we slow down, if we weaken our strategy at a certain point, the opponent is going to either exchange our pieces and this way eliminate our potential for the attack, or he will simply protect his king's side and will have no more opportunities to make significant threats there. So what do we see on the chessboard and the setup position right now? Well, black seems to have an extra pawn, but all of his pieces except the bishop are actually put on the back rank, on the 8th rank. This means very passively. So we can find out that most of the black pieces cannot really organize any defense to the black-owned king because of that position. So in reality, we can also find that one of the black king's pawns, the one on f7, is practically gone. Also, his knight, which usually needs to stay on f6, is also put in the back rank, and it's pretty passive down there. So we can find that black isn't really well placed to defend this king or confront in case white starts attacking on the king's side. However, I think that no matter that white is a little bit more active, he has better placed pieces, and he has better potential on the king's side, he really needs to play quickly and in the same time very accurately. Because if he doesn't really pay attention how he's going to continue and promote his attack, we can find out that black is simply going to attack this knight with c6. Currently he's attacking on the rook. Maybe he will blockade with d7 up to d5, develop the light square bishop, and it will be quite difficult for white to arrange any major threats against black's king or something like that. So therefore, white needs to find the most effective shortcut to realizing his advantage of better development and creating some more threats against black's king. So after evaluating the position in the proper way, white found that the best move wouldn't be to retreat the rook. A retreat of the rook, like rook e4 or rook e3 or rook h5 even, would have helped black in case of c6 to expel the white knight from there and eventually push c5. So therefore, white decided to play the move of bishop b3 to c2. And this is really an interesting continuation. The bishop is now targeting the weakest spot in black's position, the pawn on h7. We can see that this point is only defended by the king, and basically, if white even decides to sacrifice the bishop towards the pawn, practically black will leave with no defense, or very low defense, right in front of his king. Of course, white also has the idea of putting his queen up to h5 and attacking there directly. Now, most of all, after the move of bishop c2, we can see that black cannot take that rook. If he does it, then white's queen is going to come immediately to h5, and in case of g6, and then bishop takes the g6, white will create the unstoppable threats against the pawn on h7. A move like h6 seems to work, but it will only work for one move. Now we can find out that white can even sacrifice his bishop for this pawn, but then it's unstoppable to prevent queen takes h6 and the upcoming checkmate threats in front of black's king. So after moving the bishop to the c2 square, pretty much forces black to take direct action to stop queen h5 from coming. The only way to do it is with g6. Now, it seems that there is nothing dangerous coming out, and black is safe. Well, it only looks so. What white continues with is rook to the h5 square, with which he puts a direct pin against the h7 pawn, and also what we can see is that the g6 pawn will be taken. In fact, white's bishop tries to take on that. However, what about g takes to h5? It seems that this rook is hanging, doesn't it? Well, if he black takes, then white will recapture with the queen, and what we find is that, again, there is this queen takes to h7 unstoppable threat in front of black. So after rook h5 coming, black decided to move his rook up to the g8, support the g6 pawn, but now, what do we see? We see massive white pieces coming right in front of the black king. Most of the black pieces are either discoordinated or undeveloped at all, and now the black king seems so weak and unprotected that the only thing that we need to find is how to make another threat. And what white does, and what we have to do in such positions, is to find the way how we can get our pieces quickly right in front of the opponent's king. What we call this is a piece fist. Also, when we have already prepared everything, if we want to strike, we have to look at the moves that don't give the opponent time. These are the so-called forcing moves: checks, captures, or direct threats. After the move of rook g8, white has one of these. Rook takes h7 check is practically destroying the black pawn bastions in front. The king is forced to take, and then white comes up with queen to h5 with a check. We can find that the g6 pawn cannot move since it's pinned, and the black king therefore has only one square where it can retreat, g7. Then white takes, queen takes to g6 with the check. If the black king moves there, we see the powerful battery of the bishop and the queen, and the checkmating threat coming on h7. Well, black's king seems to be forced to go back to f8, and then white simply plays the move of bishop up to h6 with a check. What we find right now is that black's pieces are completely out of condition to support the black king. If black moves the bishop back to g7, and white will simply do queen f5 with a check. Knight f6, that's the only way for black to interpose a piece and oppose against the check, but then knight takes to f6. Of course, we can find that black cannot capture f6 since the bishop is pinned, and he will lose his queen otherwise. And after bishop takes to h6 and knight h5 with the check, when g7 is taken and the king doesn't seem to have any other squares, possibly it has to go here, and white is leading the way with rook 8 e1 check and upcoming mating attack against black's exposed king. So after moving bishop up to h6 with a check, black's only way seems to be rook to g7. And now it is following the main principle. If you want to succeed with your own attack, add as many pieces as you can towards the area where you're leading this attack. What white did in this case was the simple rook a1 to e1. Now the rook is joining the fight, and black is completely blocked to make any defense around his king. Well, he decided to capture the pawn, maybe to open the way of his queen. So now it seems that the major threats seem to be prevented. Well, it only looks like that. What white needs to do is practically remove the defender. Anytime when we attack, we have to look and search which is the major defender. Now the basic defender is the queen. So what we do is that we make knight f6. The intention is to eventually provoke this queen to take and then force it. Black cannot take with the queen, and it seems that the only way for him to capture is with the bishop. And here after rook takes to e8 with a check, queen takes to e8, white follows with the winning combination of queen takes to f6 check, queen f7, then bishop takes g7, king g8, and bishop to h7. And when black captures that bishop, white forcing checkmate with queen h6 and now queen h8. A powerful example